Good evening and welcome to Scale Space. We're here tonight in White City in West London for the Scale Factor. It's the first event to be held at this fantastic new facility for London entrepreneurs, company builders, academics and investors. Scale Space has been created by Imperial College London and the venture builder Blenheim Chilcott. It's for firms that want to scale up fast. It's for exactly the sort of company that's already moving in upstairs at this facility. The Scale Factor, in partnership with Imperial College Business School, is a series of events where we're going to look at a lot of the challenges that exactly this sort of company need to tackle if they're going to scale up and succeed in the UK and overseas. My name's James Ashton. It's a great pleasure to be your host this evening for an event, as you will see, is very much of its time. Before we go any further, I think we should show and tell a little bit more about Scale Space.
ScaleSpace is a community of scale-up businesses, and we exist to help unlock the potential of UK innovation.
Entrepreneurship is very much at the heart of the business school of Imperial College. We need to be connected to it. We need to be close to it. We need to be part of it. And that's exactly what ScaleSpace will bring to us. I think there are two types of benefits. One has to do with the world-class research that we have at the business school in entrepreneurship. And that's one very important part of trying to make a difference to the businesses there, is to bring that knowledge. The second part has to do with the students and bringing that drive, that experience, that aspiration to change the world and have them engage and contribute to the businesses that are going to be located in Scale Space.
This power of deep research, deep know-how and expertise academically with business builders kind of running at pace, I think that's just got to be more effective with the community that we're building.
The Living Lab is really an environment by which we're going to bring academics and startups to work together to understand what does it take to de-risk on the technology and on the market side so that they can be successful, but as importantly, so that we go beyond the anecdotes and understand broader lessons about what do you need to do in certain conditions to really be a successful and high impact scale up business.
So together, that perspective of business building along with access to leading university talent and know-how will allow us to crack the opportunity to unlock the potential of UK innovation and make a bigger contribution to the UK economy as a result.
So Scale Space was always conceived as being about more than bricks and mortar. It was meant to be a community that exists online and offline, face-to-face, where creative friction and things are happening by the water cooler. It's just as well that it does also exist virtually, particularly while it's a little bit difficult to mingle. Tonight, thank you for being here, wherever that may be, and thanks to all our speakers who you will hear from very soon for finding the time to mark this moment in Scale Space. We've got some in the room, some dialed in, some have already sent their thoughts ahead of time. It's almost like we planned it this way to be a hybrid event. For the next 90 minutes, the topic that we're all talking about is skills. How to bridge the skills gap that disproportionately affects the UK tech sector and the ambitious companies that we have on these premises and also beyond in the wider scale-up community. Discussing skills strategies for sustainable growth is the tongue twister. I won't say that again. Tonight we've got a panel of experts to discuss that from the ScaleUp Institute, Imperial College Business School, the Royal Statistical Society and the online training firm Avado, which is already one of the residents in the building here. We'll come to them shortly. Before that, beamed in from Silicon Valley, we have a keynote from Chris Ye. He's co-author of the book Blitzscaling with LinkedIn's Reid Hoffman, and he's also co-founder of the Global Scaling Academy, so a handy man to have around this evening. We want this event to be as interactive as possible, so please send us comments and questions. You can find us on Twitter. It's hashtag #TheScaleFactor. First of all, some opening thoughts from the people and organisations that have helped make Scale Space and the Scale Factor happen. We've got the President of Imperial College London, Professor Alice P. Gast, from Blenheim Chilcott, the co-founder Manoj Badale, and also from City Hall, Rajesh Agrawal, the Deputy Mayor of London for Business.
Good afternoon. There are moments in time where things take on special meaning. This is one such moment. Our vision for spaces that will allow businesses to grow, ideas to flourish, and entrepreneurs to thrive is more important than ever. Places matter in new and different ways. The long-planned formal opening of ScaleSpace will await a proper physical ribbon cutting. We look forward to that day as we take stock of how we use our precious time face-to-face and how we augment that time with virtual meetings, events, and technology. I am delighted to open this evening's event on skills, strategies for sustainable growth and innovation, the first in an exciting series of debates, the Scale Factor series. It will help develop the ScaleSpace community in partnership with Imperial College Business School. The series will provide a forum to identify and debate the most decisive challenges to scaling up new enterprises. It will bring insights and practical advice to our community from the most experienced experts in the field. Imperial's mission is to bring our research and teaching in science, engineering, medicine, and business to the benefit of society. ScaleSpace plays an important role in achieving our mission through the expansion of our ability to create and grow the enterprises of the future at our White City campus. Collaboration is key to fulfilling our mission and ambition for White City. ScaleSpace is a strong and synergistic collaboration, bringing Imperial's academic expertise and entrepreneurial community together with Blenheim Chalcott's venture building capability and experience. We will help technology, life science, and digital businesses grow in White City by connecting them with the right talent, services, and space, building a scale-up community to help growth companies succeed. I'm especially excited about the role of the Imperial College Business School in ScaleSpace. Their research and teaching spaces will be an environment for students and academics to forge connections with growth businesses. This co-location provides a unique opportunity to build a living lab at ScaleSpace. The scale-ups and the wider White City ecosystem benefit from our academics' world-class research and expertise, while our students' drive and talent and aspiration fuel a vibrant ecosystem. ScaleSpace will give our academics the opportunity to further understand and define what it takes to grow a successful business. The college's partnership with Blenheim Chalcott extends beyond ScaleSpace. Blenheim Chalcott have been generous supporters of Imperial's flagship student entrepreneurship competition, the Venture Catalyst Challenge, which has helped many budding entrepreneurs to build ideas into novel businesses. I look forward to seeing the many more new collaborations that will emerge from ScaleSpace. While today is about the next edition of the Scale Factor, in the not too distant future, I look forward to welcoming you to the facility itself. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to this evening's launch of Scale Factor, which we hope is going to be a series of events that really help you understand some of the many challenges in scaling up businesses. I'm Manoj Badali. I'm the co-founder of Blenheim Chalcott. We're Imperial's joint venture partner in ScaleSpace, which has just opened and which we're soft testing at the moment, and it's a really exciting new facility on their Southside campus. And the origin actually of that joint venture was not really about property; it was about talent, and talent is always right at the top. Finding and managing talent is always right at the top of any conversation that we have with our chief executives about the difficulties and the challenges of building businesses. I've always said, if you can hire great talent and if you can motivate and inspire great talent, an awful lot of the other business challenges take care of themselves. And here at Blenheim Chalcott, we've been building digital businesses now for over 20 years. We've built over 40 businesses, and talent has consistently been at the sort of heart of the challenge that growth businesses face. Our model is to build businesses from scratch, and sometimes we stay with businesses for 20 years, and sometimes we build those businesses and either sell them or partner with them after 3 or 4 years. So we've experienced businesses at pretty much every stage of that fast growth, venture to growth evolution, and talent is always the biggest challenge. And that's why we are so excited about our joint venture with Imperial. Actually, back in the day when we started in 1998, I think one of our first hires was from Imperial College, when I think we used the highly sophisticated talent acquisition method of sticking posters up in the college bar. So hopefully we're going to graduate from those techniques now that we're actually within the campus. And not only will we hopefully be sourcing talent from Imperial, Imperial will also be using Glenn & Chalcott and its businesses as somewhat of a living lab, because we're going to be co-located, and we indeed are co-located. In fact, I'm here right now. We're co-located with the business school. And so we're going to give the business school, both the professors and the students, the opportunities to watch venture and growth businesses in action. And hopefully we can inspire a few of those to come work for us and help build some of the great businesses that we try and disrupt industries from education to financial services across the world. So thanks again for joining us tonight from all corners of the world. It's very good of you to give up your time, and I hope that and I'm sure, in fact, that the panel are going to have some interesting things to say about the many challenges of scaling businesses, and hopefully you'll become a subscriber to Scale Factor, which is our joint venture with the business school. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rajesh Agrawal, and I'm the Deputy Mayor of London for Business, and I'm delighted to welcome launch of the Scale Factor today. During these unprecedented times, I want to thank Blenheim Chalcott and Imperial College London's leadership in creating Scale Space White City, which strengthens the area as a key innovation hub. Scale Space and initiatives like Scale Factor are important to London and support the Mayor's mission to boost and diversify our economy and the growing tech sector. The Mayor is dedicated to making sure young Londoners are equipped with the skills they need to access employment in London's growing industries, including the tech sector. And I'm so looking forward to today's timely event on this important issue.
Great stuff. Now to our keynote speaker for this first Scale Factor event. Chris Yeh is an author, a speaker, an investor, and a mentor. He might have been a very good product designer after leaving Stanford in 1995, but he decided to do something that was far more interesting. He plunged into the world of internet startups. 2 years ago, with his friend Reid Hoffman, he wrote the book Blitzscaling with the subtitle The Lightning Fast Path to Building Massively Valuable Companies. He's also co-founder of the Global Scaling Academy. Chris, thanks so much for being with us tonight, wherever it is you are, according to your backdrop, and over to you.
James, it is such a pleasure to be here, and I am coming to you from Palo Alto, California, right here in the heart of Silicon Valley. It is a lovely morning. You may have heard some of the news about the wildfires in the area, but fortunately there has been a cleansing rain, and so we can all breathe freely again, at least for the moment. But I'm delighted to be here virtually in Scale Space to talk about a very important issue, which is the skills gap. And what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the underlying reasons why the skills gap exists, and also why some of those underlying reasons can actually help us bridge that skills gap. So let's begin with really discussing the origin of the skills gap. We all know that our parents, our grandparents likely learned skills in university or their first years on the job that they're able to then apply for decades thereafter. But we find ourselves in a very different place today, where what we learned just 5 years ago may end up becoming obsolete. And the reason for this skills gap is the confluence of two factors. The first, of course, is computerization and Moore's law. Computers become twice as powerful every 18 months, and that rapid exponential pace is the thing that is driving so much of what happens in this world. The great venture capitalist Marc Andreessen has written about how software is eating the world, and I think that sounds a little scary, so I'll say instead that software is transforming the world. But the other element that is a part of this is the way we are all increasingly interconnected. Just take, for example, the fact that I'm coming to you from Silicon Valley via Zoom in order to give this live keynote. That's a sign of how all of us have been tied together by the power of the internet and more importantly, by the power of the communications devices that we carry in our pockets. And together, these two have increased the pace of change such that everyone has to be a lifelong learner. Now, one of the other things that has come out of these two factors is the concept of blitzscaling, which, of course, what, as James described, my 2018 book is about. And the core insight of blitzscaling is, in a world where we're all connected, in a world of rapid change, more and more of our markets are winner-take-most markets. And what this means is that for an industry like consumer social networking or for Airbnb-style home rentals, the first company to achieve critical scale achieves sustainable competitive advantages that allow them to dominate the market for years or even decades. And because of that winner-take-most nature of that market, companies decide to blitzscale. They decide to pursue rapid growth by prioritizing speed over efficiency, even in an environment of uncertainty. Now, this is a very rational decision on the part of the companies. This is how companies like Amazon, Airbnb, Alibaba, and so many more around the world are being built. But the side effect of this rapid pace of blitzscaling is the fact that more and more people have to reskill, have to learn, have to constantly develop new skills. Just imagine about all the people who are working in the social media industry today. This is an industry that barely existed 10 years ago and now is the dominant form of media. So these kinds of changes are going to keep coming over the coming decades. And we have to figure out a way as a society to actually manage this skills gap. Now, the good news is the same things that produce the skills gap are also acting to help close that skills gap. So let's talk about what it means for companies to blitzscale. The kind of growth I'm talking about is incredibly rapid. We're talking about companies that grow orders of magnitude in a number of years. Amazon, for example, in 1996 had annual revenues of $5 million, and by 1999 had annual revenues of $1.6 billion. That's an incredible pace of change. And if you take a look at those dollars, turn around and apply them to learning, online learning, distance learning, lifelong learning, and think about all the people that companies like Avado may be able to touch over the next few years. The ability to grow by orders of magnitude in a period of a short number of years is the same thing that's going to allow us to dramatically overhaul the way that people learn. Of course, we need to reform our educational systems and improve them, but we also need to supplement them with e-learning opportunities, with peer learning opportunities, with all of these highly scalable solutions that will allow people to identify and ultimately learn the skills they need to succeed in this world. But these blitzscaling companies offer perhaps a hidden way that they're going to actually help with the skills gap as well. So let's talk a little bit about the process of blitzscaling. In our book, we talk about how blitzscaling companies pass through 5 different stages. And these are stages that are based on the size of the company. The first stage is what we call the family stage. And that stage is where everyone's in the same room. There's generally fewer than 10 employees, and things are done in a very informal, family-like way. The next step up is what we call the tribe stage. And that's where you're going from about 10 to 99 employees. Things are a little more formal than before because not everyone's just in the same room, but everything is still based around personal relationships. The next stage after that is the village stage. That's about 100 employees to almost 1,000. And there you are becoming formal. You have a governing system, perhaps a village mayor, village chieftain, a council of some kind, and you're building in these processes in order to manage the organization. And the next layers above that are the city level and the nation level. So why do I mention these things? The reason I mention them is that historically, companies have grown slowly through these phases. A company might be founded by a family and not reach the nation stage until maybe decades or even a century later. But in the blitzscaling age, companies are growing faster than ever before, and a company like Facebook, for example, or Airbnb might progress through all 5 of these stages in less than a decade. And that changes the way we learn, that changes the way we develop skills. Now, in our book, Blitzscaling, Reid and I describe a series of counterintuitive rules that apply. Because the rules that people learn in business school, I'm a proud graduate of Harvard Business School, I'm a published author by Harvard Business Press, But the things you read about in Harvard Business Review are not necessarily going to help you when your company is tripling in size every year and when you're going through 5 orders of magnitude of growth in less than a decade. The processes and policies simply don't work, and you often have to do things that are highly counterintuitive. And the highly counterintuitive rule I'd like to discuss today is the rule that we call hire Ms. Right, not Ms. Right now. And what I mean is this. Oftentimes, when you're starting a company, you may be tempted to say, I'm going to bring in someone who has experience with growth. I want to think ahead. I want to plan ahead. I want somebody who knows what it's like to run a 10,000 person company to kind of come and help this company grow. But the fact is, most companies grow slowly, which means that most people who are used to managing large organizations have only ever managed large organizations. And the core insight of Blitzscaling is that each of those 5 stages that I described is really a phase change. It's like going from ice to water or water to steam. It's not just a quantitative change, it's a qualitative change. You might think that, for example, at the tribe stage, you're playing checkers. At the village stage, you're playing chess. At the nation stage, you might be playing Go. You're changing the game that you're playing. And each time, do we expect someone who is the world's chess champion to also be the world's Go champion? The answer is clearly no. And so the mistake that many companies make as they're growing is they bring in people who are those Go champions, the people who are brilliant at running a large organization, but who don't necessarily understand how to run an organization that is several orders of magnitude smaller. Now, growing a company at this rate is so hard that you really need to have people who specialize in that stage. And that's where hire Ms. Right now, not Ms. Right comes in. The meaning of this is, if you're at the family stage, you want to have people who are specialists at the family stage, people who really understand how to master that kind of informal management to get your company to grow. If you're at the village stage, you want people who are specialized in the village stage, who understand how to navigate the social mores of a village, a small, tight-knit village, but a village of people nonetheless who are not all in the same family, who do not share all the same goals, and who know how to manage an organization of that size. And it's so hard just to get from one stage to the next that it doesn't make sense to plan ahead. It doesn't make sense to bring in that person ahead of time. Instead, what you want to do is hire the person who's right for that moment, who's going to get you to that next stage. So in Silicon Valley, we often talk about the different VPs of sales you have for a company. And the VP of sales who's brilliant at getting a company from $0 to $1 million a year, or £0 to 500,000 pounds a year, as it were, is not the right person to get it from 500,000 pounds to 5 million pounds, and is probably not the right person to get from 5 million pounds to 50 million pounds. The set of skills, experiences, instincts are all totally different. Now, a lot of people hear this and they say, well, hold on, Chris, this sounds very cold-blooded. Are you saying that my people are all replaceable? That as I grow my company, I'm going to have to fire people and become this terrible stereotype, this caricature of a cold-hearted, ruthless capitalist? And the answer I'd say is no. That's a misperception. The people that you bring into your company at the early stages, let's say you bring in somebody who is a VP of engineering, who is running your 3-person engineering team. And let's say this person does a fantastic job. She is Ms. Right now. She is the best person in the world at doing that. Does that mean she's going to be the best person in the world at managing a 300-person engineering team? Probably not. And so you need to, along the way, bring in the other Ms. Right nows that are going to be better suited for those levels of scale. But that doesn't mean you abandon the person who helped get you there. What you do instead is you say, listen, your job title may change, but your role is always getting bigger. When we were a 10-person company, you ran a 3-person engineering team. Now that we're a 10,000-person company, you're running a 100-person engineering team that's part of an even larger overall organization. And even though your job title is no longer VP of engineering, the impact that you're having, the skills that you're building, the things that you're doing are all so much greater than they were before. And moreover, maybe the person is able to grow as the company scales. Maybe they're able to develop those new skills. But even if they don't, that's okay. the person may say, you know what? I know that I could probably run this 100-person engineering team within this larger organization, and I love this company, and I love what I do here. But you know what? I really feel like my best self is when I'm running a 3-person engineering organization for a brand new startup. And that person and that company can voluntarily decide, you know what? We've had a great run. This is the subject of Reid and Ben Kasnoka's previous book, The Alliance, which says that, just because the employment relationship ends doesn't mean that the relationship between the individual and the company needs to end. You can choose openly and honestly to decide that it makes sense for you to, as an individual, to specialize in a particular stage. And if that means switching companies every few years, that's okay, as long as you're maintaining those relationships. And this is actually one of the strengths of Silicon Valley, and one of the things that helps build and fill that skills gap. As people are specializing in the different stages of company growth, they get better and better, and then they can bring those skills to another company. Recycling the talent, recycling the Ms. Right Nows of the ecosystem is what has made Silicon Valley so successful at scaling companies quickly, and it is what is going to make other ecosystems around the world so successful at scaling companies up quickly in the future. So when we think about the skills gap, and we think about the fact that there are so many people to be educated, so many people to be reskilled, and companies are changing so quickly, it's easy to get daunted. It's easy to feel like, how are we going to manage it all? And just as I do with this terrible pandemic, I say, you know what? Of course, there are major challenges that these factors bring, but there are also opportunities. And if we frame our situation in terms of opportunity rather than challenge, then we'll be able to look forward rather than backwards, and we'll be able to actually accomplish things. If this pandemic had not occurred, would I be able to join you here today via Zoom? Likely this would have been an in-person event, and that would have been great, but my travel schedule might not have allowed me to be here. And in fact, as we go through the scale factor and future events, some of them will be virtual, some of them will be hybrid, we'll be bringing the world much more closely together. There may be speakers coming from all over the world, not just the United States, but from Asia, from South America, bringing new perspectives and new knowledge. That's actually a huge benefit. And the same applies to the notion of the skills gap. Yes, there is a skills gap. There are people that are going to need to be reskilled, and companies are changing very rapidly. But let's view that as an opportunity. Let's view that as a chance for people to develop and specialize and build these skills so that they can create more fast growth companies, so that they can create more innovative companies. And as we build up the ecosystem and fill it with lifelong learners who are using their experience at these different companies, using the tools like Avado Learning in order to really continually improve their skills as a lifelong learner, then what we build is an ecosystem and a society where we have greater resilience. As we transition from the society of our parents and grandparents, where there was very little change, to today's society of constant change, there were problems along the way. People who lost the jobs that they had done for so long and had difficulty adjusting. These new generations that we have are going to learn to constantly learn, are going to learn to deal with this continual change and continual flux. And in doing so, we will actually improve our competitiveness, our ability to succeed. We will be able to adjust our course to change rapidly using the tools of Blitzscaling to allow us to really fully capitalize on all the opportunities. So as we sit here today in Scale Space, opening up this new space, I look forward and I see amazing possibilities. I see companies that will be able to come in here and use this as a place to nurture themselves, to grow rapidly, to gain help from all the incredible people around them, but more importantly, to graduate. We don't want these companies to stay at Scale Space forever. We want these companies to graduate, to go out there, to build their own headquarters, to educate more and more employees, to create more and more human capital that can then be recycled into other great companies. That's how we build sustainable innovation over time. So when I see the skills gap, yes, I see a challenge, but I also see an opportunity. And I believe that the power of Blitzscaling, the power of institutions like Scale Space, are going to help us meet that challenge and turn it into a fantastic opportunity to build a better world.
Chris, thanks so much. Really interesting thoughts from you in Palo Alto, and you're probably right. You might not have been with us today if we hadn't have had the pandemic and we changed things around. Can I ask you a few questions? I'm very interested in your perspective on geographic differences, where this skills gap is lighter or or heavier, if you like. We sit here and we always look at Silicon Valley and think, you guys have got it really great. There's hot and cold running computer engineers on the Sandhill Road and so on. Is it really as easy as that? I mean, you say it's tough for you as well. And then what about those other geographies? What do you think about the European challenge and Asia?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons that Silicon Valley has done so well in human capital is not just the fact that it has great research universities, because of course there are great research universities everywhere. There are great research universities involved in this particular scale space effort. But what has made Silicon Valley stand apart is the labor mobility, the ability to recycle that talent from place to place, to let that talent move to where it has the greatest possible fit and the greatest possible productivity, and the ability to attract talent from around the world. Now, this has been a bit more of a challenge recently. As you know, we have an administration in Washington that is not friendly to immigration, and that has definitely proven challenging. I would also say that there are other challenges that the area here in Silicon Valley has to overcome in terms of the fact that we have plenty of people here who do not have computer science degrees who are being priced out of the region. And so we also have to deal with that. But I do think that many of these lessons can be learned and applied in ecosystems around the world. Before this pandemic, I spent much of the past 3 to 4 years traveling around the world to different ecosystems. And I found brilliant entrepreneurs, brilliant investors, brilliant executives everywhere. And what was missing were, in many cases, the policies and processes and infrastructure from a regulatory and governmental perspective to allow them to really achieve the things that they can achieve. So I think that, again, the human talent is everywhere. The main thing is allowing that talent the mobility to be able to move to its greatest fit. And that's always been the mission of LinkedIn, to bring opportunity to the world. And I feel like if you were able to let the talent flow and give it a place to grow, then you'll have an amazing ecosystem wherever you are in the world.
Okay. And just a little more on blitzscaling, and you talk a lot on the mobility that's really important for people to have, and it feels like there's a lot of emphasis on hiring the right people for the right stage of your company, which is for the leader to get right. What about for the people who are in the company? Is there also that emphasis on training, or is a lot of that to be done by the individual, to be done almost through osmosis from being in that larger company? To be a success at blitzscaling, do you also need to really focus on that upskilling?
So upskilling is something that is so essential that sadly most companies, even companies in Silicon Valley, do not do a particularly good job of doing. And what we've said for companies is one of the best things that you can do is to become a developer and exporter of talent. If you think about how people judge a company, the main way they judge a company, at least if they're thinking about working there, is first and foremost by the people who are currently there, and then second, by the people who previously worked there who went on to other things. And we talked before about great universities. I, of course, am a graduate of Stanford University, a great university. Stanford University is Stanford University because of the fact that its students went on to found Yahoo and Google and so on and so forth. If those alumni don't go on to great things, then the university itself doesn't build its reputation. And the same is true of companies. So I think that companies need to increase their emphasis on upskilling. And I'm in fact an advisor to a number of companies like Skyhive here in North America that are doing precisely that, helping companies figure out how to upskill their employees. But the other side of it is the individual. As an individual, you don't necessarily control what your company is going to do, what your company's policies are. Maybe your company has a policy of paying for training, maybe it doesn't. But as an individual, it's incumbent on you to find ways to be a lifelong learner. And whether that's by consuming information online, whether that's by experimenting and playing with things, whether it's by going ahead and taking classes at the local university or college, I think that that's something that every individual needs to focus on doing, because everyone is going to count on the fact that the skills that are relevant to them today are likely to be irrelevant to them in 10 years.
Chris, a little on inspiration. I remember interviewing your co-author Reid a few years ago, and he talked about when he started up, he talked about starting up LinkedIn. I think it was pretty much 2003. He promised himself a year off after selling PayPal. Obviously, he had some money in his pocket then. The dot-com collapse had happened. Some people might have thought it wasn't a good time to start. It felt like he was itching to get back into the game again. So I see why a leader, someone who's been successful before, can go again and take that risk. But how does that leader inspire the people to follow him at the startup stage, but then also at the scale-up stage?
So leadership is so important in companies that are blitzscaling, just as important as it is in companies that are startups. You may think that because the company has great momentum and is growing rapidly, that that's enough to keep people on board. But the fact is there are plenty of companies out there that are doing great. And the ones where the leader is able to inspire the people are going to better retain those employees. I think the most important thing for inspiring people is to both articulate a clear vision that is going to inspire them, that they can buy into, that they feel like they're part of something bigger, but then also to live up to that vision. And I'll use the example of LinkedIn. The reason why LinkedIn worked so well for Reid is because it was an expression of his core beliefs in connecting people together. Most people don't realize that Reid had previously founded an unsuccessful social network called SocialNet during the dot-com boom. That was what he was doing at the early stages of and before he joined PayPal as an executive. He was actually a founding board member of PayPal while he was the founder and CEO of SocialNet as well. And LinkedIn is simply a reflection of the fact that there is something he had a core belief in, which is that the most important thing are the networks around us, and that connecting people is something that he was passionate about. And so starting LinkedIn, he was able to convey both that vision and the commitment he had to that vision. Now, there are certain things that leaders should absolutely do as they're growing. So for those of you who are entrepreneurs or leading companies right now, there are a couple things that become different as you grow. Probably the most important is you have to do what we call shifting from dialogue to broadcasting. You can no longer rely on individual one-on-one relationships and catch-ups to manage a company once it gets beyond a certain size. So the best leaders find ways to broadcast their vision. They are like Brian Chesky at Airbnb, who writes a letter to the entire company every Sunday. Or perhaps they record regular videos, as Angela Ahrendts did when she was at Apple, and she would record videos on her iPhone and send them to her entire team. But find ways to broadcast that vision to make sure people feel that touch.
Okay, really interesting. And I do remember, as he told me at the time, it was a very, very big vision. It was, it's almost like he had a book in mind in the future. It was going, we go big or we go home. That seemed to be the idea, and I can see why people would get behind that. Just finally from you, Chris, for now, what's changed? It's 2 years since you published the book. You touched on COVID and how it's affected, your schedule and all business people's schedule. But what do you think it's done for some of the key tenets of the book? I mean, are people minded to attack business growth and scaling even more now, or do you sense there's a cautiousness around some of the companies that you're involved in?
So to me, it looks like people are continuing to be extremely aggressive, but I do feel that there has been a useful level of caution that's been added, and that's primarily due to companies like WeWork, which had embraced the blitzscaling philosophy without actually reading the book. So in our book, we describe what are the necessary preconditions for blitzscaling. And there's two things that really set blitzscaling companies apart from non-blitzscaling companies in terms of the opportunity. And that is a winner-take-most market and a core distribution strategy that allows you to grow quickly. And in the case of WeWork, this is a business where there is no winner-take-most market. There's no network effect that makes you more likely to be at a WeWork than at any other co-working facility. And there's no way to land grab all the office space in a city. Conversely, there's no distribution strategy. You're distributing in office. Yes, you have to go out and hand by hand, individual tenant by individual tenant, convince them to come on board. So it's very difficult to actually blitzscale a company like that. And that's reflected by the fact that WeWork spent, well over $10 billion on its growth, and it achieved growth, but not in an economic way, and it didn't achieve any sustainable competitive advantage. So the biggest change is probably, I think people understand that you can't just sprinkle blitzscaling on any company. You have to actually understand the factors that go into it and make sure those essential elements are present. I do think that with this pandemic, obviously it has affected some industries, but it has also accelerated others. And the key is to have that nimbleness to adapt quickly. Something I found remarkable is that Airbnb, which saw a near collapse of its revenues early in the pandemic because everyone was canceling the trips that they had scheduled to make, has now rebounded so strongly that its run rate is 70% ahead of where it was in 2019. So it's actually grown 70% this year and is still on track for its IPO. And that's because it was able to adapt quickly and focus instead on longer term stays for people who wanted to, get out of their particular location, go to some place that's a great vacation area, still work from home while that's going on. And that's an example of that ability to rapidly change when you are applying these principles.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I think with WeWork, possibly all that tequila was not so great for the blitzscaling either.
The tequila, the cannabis that was on the private jets, yes, that did not appear to be
I didn't read that chapter. There's not a chapter on that in the book.
No, sadly. We'll have to add that in the second edition.
Yeah, that would be good. Great, Chris. Thanks for now. And I think you're going to stay with us and join the rest of the panel. So time to move on now to...
all the way out here to London. I might as well stay.
You may as well. It feels like you're in the room.
Thank you.
So time to move on to our panel now. Just a reminder, questions or comments, please, if you have any of them for Chris or for our other speakers, please tweet hashtag the scale factor. Now, to focus specifically on the UK skills perspective, we've got 4 experts, some in the room, some not. First of all, Irene Graham. She's the Chief Executive of the ScaleUp Institute. It's a not-for-profit company focused on making the UK the best place in the world to scale up a business. Irene's a former senior banker at Standard Chartered Bank, where she set up and scaled several of the bank's key client and product businesses. Behind me at very safe distance, Dr. Mark Kennedy is Associate Professor at Imperial College Business School. Mark's research focuses on the emergence of new markets and industries and some of the basic building blocks of organizing. He's widely published, having appeared in the American Sociological Review and the Academy of Management Journal, among others. Third on the panel is Richard Haynes. He's Chief Commercial Officer of Avado, which is a professional academy. It offers interactive learning in areas such as data, marketing, digital and people. Avado is currently working with 600 organizations in 110 companies. And joining us very shortly, Stian Westlake. He's the brand new Chief Executive of the Royal Statistical Society. Stian was a government advisor for 3 successive ministers for universities and science. Before that, he spent 8 years as Executive Director at Nesta, the UK's Innovation Foundation. Irene, I'll start with you first. Thanks so much for joining us. You know Chris well, and of course Reid Hoffman was involved in helping set up ScaleUp Institute, I think 5 years ago now. What do you make of his comments? And I'm really interested, what do you think those specific challenges are on the skills side in the UK?
Thanks very much, and great to be with you all here today. I mean, I think one of the things to just reflect broadly around the challenges for the UK and scaling up is that there are sort of 5 key challenges our scale-up businesses keep saying they're facing. One of them is talent. It's the priority challenge, and also building out the leadership capacity with that. But alongside that challenge of talent and leadership is also access to market, getting to the right corporate collaboration, getting into the right government collaboration, getting the right international access. And that's becoming quite an increasing priority for our scaling businesses, who are also very innovative and very much wanting to go global, to Chris's point about that world of opportunity that's out there. And there is also then the access to growth capital and the access to the infrastructure or place to grow. And I think that's why we're so delighted with the launch today of ScaleSpace, because what that is offering to our scaling businesses is the space to grow, and alongside it, access to talent, because there's the access to Imperial and everything that it can bring in that talent base. There's also the access to capital with Blenheim Chalcott there on the doorstep, building that investment ecosystem. And there's also the opportunity through that for the collaboration in terms of market opportunities. And I think that's the importance of the ingredients that you have within ScaleSpace and what's being developed here. And to Chris's point, that really big point about ecosystems, because one of the things when we also look at what are the drivers to local growth, whether that be in London, whether it be in Bristol, whether it be in Manchester, whether it be in the US, whether it be in Singapore, is there's really three driving factors. Have you got good access to talent and the variety and range of that talent and the quality of that talent? Have you got access to a cluster? Have you got a cluster? I think Silicon Valley is just great in terms of the way the cluster operates and the recycling that Chris spoke about. And are we doing that as effectively here in the UK? It does make a difference. And then access to that growth capital. And that's where we have, Silicon Valley has great access to that. We have a good opportunity here in the Golden Triangle. We often talk about London, Cambridge, Oxford. It's more difficult in some of our regions. So those are some of the mixes of challenges that we're seeking to address. If I specifically hone in on talent, then I think there's a couple of dynamics here in the UK. I think our scale-up businesses, often everybody thinks it's only tech qualifications that they need and tech enablement, but actually consistently our scale-ups are saying their social skills, and I think Imperial will touch on this more, social skills that the individuals bring into the company really, really important. We can teach the tech, we can't teach sometimes the fundamental social skills needed within that. And looking forward, our scale-ups are looking for people with critical thinking and service orientation as critical factors in what they bring in to the company. They're also looking for diverse talent. They're looking for homegrown talent, but they're also looking for international talent. So to Chris's point, the fluidity and ability to bring talent in from across borders is vital. Around 7 out of 10 of our scale-ups employ people from Europe, 3 in 10, 4 in 10 employing them from elsewhere in the world. And there's a lot of employment happening in our scale-ups here domestically. So we need to connect that talent in at a local level, but also at an international level. And we also often want to leverage the students that come in from abroad. So our universities and business schools have a big, important factor there. But then I just want to touch on Chris's point about the right people at the right moment of the journey of the company. One of the things that I know our scale-up leaders value is peer-to-peer engagement, and they also value being able to access mentors or non-executive directors that have had the experience of the growth journey. And those are areas that we as a UK environment need to connect better at into our scale-up firms. So that's touching on some broad points there, which I'm sure we'll pick up in further elements of the panel discussion.
Thanks, Irene. I suppose it's worth pointing out for people who aren't as well versed in the work of ScaleUp Institute. I mean, the work you've done over the last 5 years is really to define this market, if you like. There wasn't such a thing as a ScaleUp if you go back just a few years. So I think now we're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking really about a chunk of about 40,000 companies. It's 20% of all turnover, UK corporate turnover, but also about 20% of employee growth. I mean, these are, in terms of growing and taking in new people, these are quite hungry beasts. So, if we're going to make a success of them, we do need to find the right people at the right time.
And it's worth also saying, James, I mean, this is part of our SME economy. Everybody says we have the SMEs are the vibrancy of our economy. Well, we have 5.7 million SMEs that generate 2 trillion to the UK economy. 33,000 of those are scale-ups, growing at 20% or more. There's around another 16,000 that are on that journey of scaling. They generate 1 trillion of that. So 50% of our SME economy is these scale-up businesses. And it's also important to say they are across every area of the country, not just London. And they're also in every sector, not just tech. So there's a real balance across this economy that we have for these businesses.
Okay, and just finally from you for now, interested in Chris's point on mobility. I mean, it used to be that London was this magnet for talent, if you like, from overseas, from Europe and beyond, and then some of that talent, if you like, was dispersed through the UK. I mean, we're absolutely still open for business. I think Brexit makes things a little harder, but just regardless of that talent pipeline coming into the UK, we absolutely need to sort out our domestic skill supply as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's where the business schools and universities all have a really important role to play. So does the private sector, and the government's got a number of initiatives that it's seeking to make sure that employability comes through. Chris mentioned lifelong learning as well. It's in our own hands to make sure that's happening in our own companies to upskill through that process. Okay,
thanks for now, Irene. Mark, Irene mentioned, I think she mentioned some research you've done, which is a very easy way into the technical skills that we absolutely need, but then you've done some work that reminds us that actually this next generation coming into these fast-growing businesses, there needs to be some work done somewhere about social skills and how these employees are glued together.
True. So we have been for a little while looking at the things that people do in organizations and trying to help others understand what will data science and artificial intelligence, machine learning enable in terms of the increased productivity of work that sadly also means that you need less people for some of these jobs, and to just prepare for that. And looking at that, you would normally think that somebody like me would say, oh, we need more math and science and everybody's got to skill up on the things that you would think of as these skill gaps that we have. And that's true. But it just is the case that we're not all going to be developing breakthrough algorithms in machine learning in the future. That's not going to happen. Some people are still going to be designing skateboards and starting bands and shooting films and all of that sort of thing. And we need that. And especially here in the UK, that's an important comparative advantage. So we started looking at what will that change actually look like. And we found, surprisingly, that although there's a lot that software can do to make us more productive, it was actually in the area of helping people stick together, a thing that we call social glue, that really is an opportunity. And that's because, and this is a wonky point, I'll try to say this quickly, over the last generation, organizations have shifted strategically from being a bunch of mostly separate units. We kind of did away with conglomerates. And we've gone to this idea that you need high relatedness among all the different parts of a business. And the high relatedness of the business only generates value when the people are getting their relationships together.
Just focus, just do one thing really well.
Well, it might be do 2 or 3 things, but blend them together. And it turns out that takes a lot of people time. And if you're doing that and you're not good at it, you don't stick around. So the idea is that we need not just to do the things that we classically think of as sort of tech skills, but also have tech help us do the things that are human.
It's an awful lot to get on top of, because there's the grumbles that millennials or whoever either graduating and come out of school. There's literacy, there's numeracy, there's some fairly basic things that employees of all levels need, but also they almost need to be taught to relate to each other. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, you can tell by my white beard here that I'm not the youngest in the room, but like back when I was meeting up with young people, we didn't stare at our phones. And that's a common thing now. So it's not that people need to taught how to be human. It's that we need to be taught that we can't rely on the tech to do that for us. You can't manage relationships by email alone. You occasionally have to message people directly, get in synchronous conversations. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be limiting your potential.
So the question to throw back at you then is, if this is a skill that is lacking, then who is upskilling at this point? Is this something that the universities and others have failed on, or is it
this
something?
This is not a plug for any company that makes a product that a lot of us are using a lot right now that rhymes with dreams. But if you look at what they're doing, they're iterating on the feature set of that almost monthly. And they have quite a chase, with a company that does a product that rhymes with boom. And that whole thing is going kaboom right now, just in terms of the number of people that are jumping onto that and learning how to use it. I mean, it's It's working and breaking in about 2-week cycles right now. And COVID is responsible for that, but that's a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. We need to not only be better at that as individuals, but we need to also, in the tech sector, be innovating to support that.
Richard, I'll come to you shortly. Irene, I'm interested, you talked a little bit about policies and government level. I mean, what are looking at your last annual review, the real success, I think, has been a whole host of collaborations. There's lots and lots of things happening for scale-ups at the local level, and real varieties in level of where there's a strong skill base and where there isn't. I think York was very strong, and Tees Valley was less so. What do you think needs to happen at the national government level to really push on this agenda now?
Yes, the good news is we've got the attention of the national government level, but also the attention of the private sector, because this is going to be a combination. It's not only one lever that you can pull. I think really important, we've seen the industrial strategy and local industrial strategies deployed. We're now in the focus on the economic recovery, and very likely around the corner a comprehensive spending review. So what we've really got to see, I think, is the devolution and empowerment at a local level. We've got to really scale up what is working today, whether that's in the Innovate UK space and our innovation agency, or British Business Bank in regional capital allocation, and then also the empowerment at a local level. We have the mayoral authorities. You saw from our London mayor's team today, the deputy mayor speaking. Mayors have an important role, that local mayor, the combined authorities. So we need to see investment happening locally, the empowerment locally under a national framework, but we've got to unleash that at that local level, and we've got to see that investment. Now, this government is very focused on levelling up. That's a phrase that a lot of us in the UK have heard recently in that regional agenda. It's going to be really important to get that right, but it's really important to build on what works today, not start trying to reinvent the wheel in every aspect, and to crowd in the public sector, the private sector, and the academic sector, because our business schools are real anchors to our localities, and if we get their nexus of engagement with business right, as Imperial is doing with this, I think we've got real opportunity, and we see that happening around the country as well.
And having dissected all of these different sectors, I know you've done work around life sciences and others in that area. What are those professions? What are the ones that we can't find, rare as hen's teeth, if you like, that we're absolutely crying out for? Are there a few particular areas that you think really need to be worked on?
Well, there's when you look at Brabraham in Cambridge or Audley Park, Scale Space here, how do we create spaces like that really allow a business not just to start but to scale, and to have access to all of the amenities in one place that they need, and the skill sets? I do think one of the big things we focused on is can you get better peer-to-peer engagement happening between the scale-up businesses themselves, and there's been more effort put towards that. And there's been more effort also put into sort of the leadership tools that are available. But Anzina regularly records the number of job vacancies. We have got a dearth of some of the technical skills that are needed into some of the companies. But generally, and I have to say this, one of the big things we've got to get across to our generations of younger and older people is the opportunities in our scale-ups. So often still, we have a generation of school leavers and university leaders who think about the banking sector and brand names that have been established for a long time. They aren't as well connected to the really growing companies locally, and we've got to find a better way of putting those companies on the map and actually connecting the opportunities and the skill sets into them, and that's one of the things we've got to change.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Let me come to you on Avado. So this is where I think you're working, 600 organisations you're working for in 110 countries. So I think this is a real example of using these companies have realised they need to offer the upskilling. They need to connect with the workforce. How do the companies that use you for all of the courses that you offer, what do they measure for success?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Well, thankfully, I think it's changing. So if you were to look at this maybe 5-10 years ago, I think those measures of success would probably be more around kind of course kind of attendance. So it would be, of the 100 people that you invited to the course, how many arrived, how many arrived on time.
It's a tick in the box if they show up.
And,
wow.
and how many stayed the duration. Now, thankfully, that's changed. So I think if we look at it today, it's probably much more around learner kind of participation, so measures around engagement, and actually really importantly kind of collaboration with other learners on that program as a kind of indicator as to whether the learner on that program is really kind of getting value from the course. I think where it's moving to, and if I reflect on some of the more recent discussions that we have with some of the organisations that we work with, I think the key thing is moving the kind of discussion from the learning objectives kind of adjunct to the business objectives and tying them both together. So a lot of organisations that we work with, be them the smaller SMEs or some of the large multinational corporates, are really keen to draw much closer association by how the learning experience or how the learning programme drives the business outcomes. Now that naturally, depending on the size, maturity, sector of the business, those can be quite different, right? So it could be the business objectives might be employee retention, it could be speed of product to market, it could be really hard commercial stuff like sales pipeline closing, return on investment of marketing investment. But I think so. There's no one size fits all. But I think the key for organisations to kind of make best use of their learning budgets is to invest the time up front, with learning partners like us, to kind of be really clear about what that learning is driving and what that learning is driving from a business outcome perspective. And then as importantly, make sure that there's the right measurement mechanism. So there's little point in just measuring at the end of a learning experience. Actually, what we're increasingly finding is organisations want to measuring it through that learning experience, such that for longer learning programmes, there's the opportunity to, if you like, course correct or tweak some of the delivery in the latter stages of a programme, such that it really does hit those objectives, which are much, much closer tied to the business objectives of that organisation. So thankfully, I think it's moving from what probably historically was quite a crude measure to a much more sophisticated measure now that organisations are really getting behind.
It's true what you say though, because if you worked in a big organisation that was trundling along, if you go back a few years and you were put down for a training day, there'd be a real sagging of the shoulders. Oh my God, I'm going to have to work at the weekend to catch up and so on. But you think there's the fact that so many people are using you suggests that employers are a bit more savvy about lifelong learning and keeping staff loyal and so on. But you think the employee as well has cottoned on, actually there's something positive about a training day or a training module or something?
I think so. I mean, it sounds really basic, right? But learning, whether it's for small children or whether it's adults, the concept's the same. Like if it's fun, people will engage with it. And I think designing these learning experiences for organisations, irrespective of their size, it's about making them engaging, and it's maybe even to a greater extent about the experience than it is sometimes the kind of raw content. Better that everyone engages with that and sees it through to the end of the course and gets what they want from it than it only being attractive to the maybe few on a learning course or learning experience that really want to engage with the kind of third or fourth order content. So, it is fairly straightforward. It's make it engaging and make it fun. And I think learning, certainly virtual learning now since COVID, is far cry from what it would have been 5 years ago, which, as you suggest, it was a much more kind of dry, sunk shoulders experience, which hopefully won't return. No sinking shoulders at Avado. No sinking shoulders at Avado. What about the appetite for training and ongoing learning as it differs around the world? Because you've got a good view of the world, 110. You've got a few countries to go still. You've got a fair few there, so you can see where's the appetite and where is that UK employee or that UK employer in the league table? Yeah, so we deal with organisations that are principally based out of the UK, so some of their learners will be geographical. Yep. So I think one of the interesting observations is the fact that the maturity in those different areas on a particular topics, take digital marketing for instance. So we will work with organisations who are quite keen to get their employees or their kind of learners to a kind of comparable level globally. The interesting thing is they often start from different start points. So when we're designing the learning experiences, I think you have to start from a baseline. Part of this about measuring the success is knowing where you start from. So I think part of the design of the learning starts before the course starts. It's about baselining the current maturity of that organisation. So I think, where does the UK sit in there? I'm sure there are organisations, or there are countries, or there are territories in the world that are more advanced, and there are certainly those that are, that are probably lower on the maturity curve. But there are some interesting disparities in territories, and I think if you're going to design a global learning experience, as we do for many of our clients, you can't make the assumption that everyone starts from the same position.
I see. Mark, I suppose the challenge, and Chris referred to this in his talk, is that as a company changes, the skills change. So what's your perspective then on that upskilling versus the churning the people? It has to be a bit of both, I guess, if you're going to scale effectively.
I mean, yeah. If you think of yourself as the person who might be churned, that can be a sort of churning up kind of thing.
It never happens in academia.
We try not to have it happen, but I guarantee you it does. But so if you think about it that way, and you just say, well, how do I want to avoid that? I think it is about just launching yourself cyclically into seasons of life where you decide to be stupid again. And you just say, I don't know how to do this, but it looks like a thing, better start. And I think that's for me, that's one of the great privileges of being in a university, being around young people. The energy is contagious. And I mean, if you want, you can become a fuddy-duddy, but you can also kind of stay like younger than your years just by learning, over and over again. But the key is, you got to be stupid to be smart.
Got it. Irene, I'm interested in what you see as the investor perspective, because I'm going to come to Chris on this shortly as well. I guess to scale effectively, you have to find the right people, keep the right people, train them up, and kind of keep the whole show on the road. But do you think investors get that there needs to be that significant investment in people?
Yeah, I think ultimately all investors will say the business will be as good as the people that are leading it and within it and are innovating with it. So that's always a critical part of an investor's assessment about whether the business has really got the scalability. And investors look at scalability and commerciality, but one of the key factors they're going to be assessing is this the right people to invest in? And it's why when you look at going through onto an IPO or into the AIM market here, there's an awful lot of connectivity and dialogue that takes place with investors. But that's same in the angel market. And Chris, I know we'll talk about Silicon Valley in the way in which the recycling is happening of investment, but how the angel investors and those investing through the VCs will be really looking at the team. But also the capacity of that team to evolve. And I think that's a really important fact as well. So, that's a definite critical criteria for an investor.
And Chris, to bring you back in, if you're still with us, you said, I think, I paraphrase, but it was the training, the Silicon Valley's companies, actually, it's that training, that upskilling that is something of an Achilles heel for some of the firms that you're aware of over there. Is that, you think, where other regions where UK and others can actually really gain an advantage, that close relationship from the cluster, corporates with the universities and so on, that perhaps has been lacking a little bit in Silicon Valley?
Yes, I believe that focusing on people development is definitely an opportunity for differentiation and even catch up. So if we think about Silicon Valley, as Irene mentioned, investors absolutely care about the team, but they typically try to just go ahead and cherry pick the team from other places where the people have been developed. So there isn't that same emphasis on developing people. And I think that if you are able to place a really strong emphasis on developing people, if you are able to make in an ecosystem, for example, make it very easy for individuals to pursue continuing education at universities or by other means, I think that could be a competitive advantage. One of the funny stories I'll tell is there is a relatively young startup which I have been working with that wanted to do this. Now, if you're a big established company like Apple, for example, there is a way to do this. You can go ahead and you can create Apple University. And Apple hired some of my friends who are brilliant business school professors to come and basically teach internally at Apple so that they could build their people up. And that's definitely something that you can do, but it's hard to do if you're a tiny little startup. And so what this founder did, I thought was very clever. What he did was he said, I will pay for a masterclass subscription for any employee who wants one, because I want you to be thinking of yourself as someone who is constantly learning. And it's not that expensive, but it is something that you never hear about. And so I thought that was a very clever approach. And I think that both individual companies and entire ecosystems can adopt such clever approaches to emphasize and signal to employees and members of the team, we are investing in your learning, we're investing in your skills.
Great, thanks, Chris. We've got some questions now from people who are listening in and following us this evening. And if you want to send some comments or send some questions, it's on Twitter, hashtag the Scale Factor. So Sarah from Edinburgh says, what should the government be doing more or less of to address this problem of skills? Well, I think we've talked about what they should be doing more of, Irene. I wonder if there's anything you can think of that they're doing that maybe just isn't having the desired effect and could be cancelled.
I think one of the things as well, if that's an individual from Edinburgh, it's good that Scotland has control of its skills agenda as well, so that they can really focus in on what's needed to be done locally. I think one of the things you don't want to see happening is a keeping of changing of things. So if I talk to our school teachers or the university and business school leaders, I think a constant change of curriculum, a constant change of the way in which things are operating is not always helpful, but I think you also need to leave empowerment at a local level. So, keeping a level of consistency, the right investment, and giving that empowerment locally is really important. And so less interference might be one of the things one might be calling for.
Thank you. Stian, interested in both technical skills and soft skills. With your experience advising universities, ministers, to what extent do you think are educators doing a better job now of producing talent that scaling firms need? I mean, there is an argument that actually they're not there to be talent factories. There's something, but actually employers would like them to be talent factories.
I think it's a gradual process. I think what you learn in school, in higher education, is what you learn in the classroom is important, but mentorship, access to role models is just as important. And one of the great things about, I think, things like ScaleSpace is it provides opportunities for people who are in education to see what people are actually doing, who are growing businesses, who are thriving. And that kind of informal contact, that role modelling, I think, can be just as important as the classroom education.
So it's informal, but it is not. I remember interviewing Janet Beer, who's the Vice Chancellor at Liverpool, and I said, well, what do you say to employers that grumble that you're not producing work-ready graduates? And she said, well, why don't you ask these people about whether they're actually graduate-ready employers? I think she's used that one before, probably. But is there any sort of tension then between universities and employers? And if so, how do we bring that together to address the skills agenda?
I think your average university it's fundamentally a university. It's not a business. Those skills don't come naturally unless you make them come naturally. And bringing together businesses, giving them a home in the university campus is one small way that you can start to make that happen.
Yeah. Mark, I couldn't help notice you were nodding when I talked about tension. Do you see that between academia and, obviously something like ScaleSpace is, this is a great coming together, but maybe there could be more of it.
Well, I'm excited about this. We like, ivory tower, people say, but I say ivory turnstile. Let's bring it on. We want, circulation. And it's with policymakers, with business people, and with our students. But yes, there's a tension. And the tension is that it's possible for us to educate students to the point where they're able to do things that the companies who are hiring them are not really ready to let them go do. And we see that a lot in this area of data science, particularly machine learning. So you get skilled up, you're ready to do the cool stuff, and then you go do something Dullsville.
So actually these companies that we talk about as big and bold and wanting to take over the world, there is still some sort of conservatism when you get from academia into the world of work.
Well, it's the thing that I was mentioning earlier. It's the bosses having not sort of decided, I don't mind feeling like I don't know it all here for a little while in order that I will learn it. And now that's the person you're taking direction from. And that's, that's about an 18-month cycle to disillusionment for
Because all the books say you are meant to hire people cleverer than you. That's not always the case.
Takes a brave soul to do that.
Sure. We have another question. This is from someone who's tuning in, from Adam in Bristol. And Richard, I wonder if you can help with this one. With unemployment figures this week only set to get worse, how can young people in particular think differently and get access to resources to upskill?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. So Avado, some of the other Blenheim Chalcott companies, as well as some big national employers in the private sector and the public sector have been working really closely over the last kind of 16 weeks or so. So talking very much about the same theme, where around collaborating, different types of organisations collaborating to try and find these kind of successful learning programmes. So we launched a programme called Fast Futures. We did that in July this year. It's been, say runaway success. So it's a skills program aimed at young people, 18 to 22-year-olds from a variety of different backgrounds. And it's designed to bridge this gap between full-time education and work, and to give those young people the skills that they increasingly need in a more distributed world post-COVID, so that they feel more comfortable in applying for jobs, more successful in those applications. And I suppose, to your point, Mark, when they land, they can hit the ground running. So it's been really interesting. We drew probably about 6 times the number of applications than we had free or fully funded scholarships. So the program starts on Monday, and I think it's a good example of where, if you can get the right people together, so from the private sector, from the public sector, with some government involvement, how you can actually create meaningful programs that are teaching or kind of helping these young people, equip them with the skills that they need. So, we've got modules on that program that are around data, that are around digital marketing, that are around agility, customer centricity. And if I reflect a little bit on my kind of Avado client discussions, these are the very skills that organisations, I think, are now really realising that this is not just the preserve of the finance team or the tech team or the product team. These are things that organisations need to have in their DNA. So there are programmes like Fast Futures and others around the UK that I think are doing a great job at equipping these young people with those skills. And actually another kind of element of that is it's not just equipping perhaps the traditional young people from the traditional backgrounds that would go into these roles. But one of the key premises of the Fast Futures programme and some other schemes in the UK is that about diversity. So I think the employers that we work with, I think, are really much more passionate and much more committed to bringing a more diverse selection of young people into the organisation than they may have done years ago.
And this is the likes of BT, Barclays, AO.com and so on. And this is a positive out of COVID. None of this would have happened, I don't think, unless...
Absolutely, yeah. So it was instigated from within Blenheim Chalcott and kind of incubated to Irene's point, the ecosystem, having some of these similar businesses together in environments like ScaleSpace allows you to get stuff off the ground and get it off the ground quickly. So I think probably 16 weeks ago it didn't exist. Kind of 8 weeks ago it was still in design, and we have 1,000 students from a variety of backgrounds starting on the programme on Monday morning. Our ambition is to scale that even further in next year to try and affect the lives of more young people. But the really interesting part about that diversity angle is I think perhaps organisations over the last kind of X years maybe have seen the kind of inclusiveness and diversity element as almost like a brand vehicle. If I look at the conversations that we've had through Fast Futures and then through our Avado clients, I think they really see that now as, if you don't have that in your organisation, you will be less innovative, you will be less creative, you will be less productive. So it's been a super fun thing to be involved in, and I think it doesn't solve the problem for those young people, but it helps it helps get them more ready for what is a super super difficult workplace to be entering over the next.
So it sounds like it might happen
so.
again, well, obviously you haven't started yet, but you need to see how this cohort goes. It could happen again, and so if someone like Adam from Bristol is wanting to know about how to get access to resources to upskill, then it's keeping tabs on this program going into 2021.
Absolutely, yeah. So as I said, we were unable to offer as many places as we had applicants this time round. Since then, and we had a relatively short window, right? So we had about 4 weeks of applications because we were looking to kind of align with the September academic term. We're still getting interest now, both from and students rather, both employers wishing to support it. So yeah, we're hoping to run the program, multiple cohorts of the program into 2021. So Adam and any of the other participants should keep tabs on it.
And Avado is here now in the building in White City at Scale Space. We're all craving human contact, so just remind us what it's like. I mean, are you actually bumping into people at the water cooler and things?
Well, we haven't quite. Well, we are transitioning from we were elsewhere on the Imperial campus to here. So, as a certain population can tend to be here a little bit more often than not, and I think it has reminded us that whilst there's definitely some kind of huge benefits in terms of people being getting more time or having less redundant time in the week where they're traveling and doing whatnot. I think what it has reminded us is that people do crave human contact, right? And we had a couple of meetings here last week over the last few weeks or so, and the mood is very different to trying to do that through the video conferencing facility that rhymes with dreams. So it's a good feeling. I'm not sure we will necessarily go back to a pre-COVID world either at Avado or more generally, but I think we'll definitely take the good bits from remote working, but we won't lose all of the kind of great bits from kind of human to human contact.
I actually put some business cards in my wallet this morning, which was I hadn't done that for a long time, so that was quite a nice feeling. Steen, another question maybe you can help with from Fiona from London. This is around how can employers best identify the areas they need to upskill their teams and how to excite their teams who may be resistant to change. So I know you've written a lot on intangibles and human capital and so on. I mean, it's something about delving into the workforce there.
It's a real challenge, isn't it, knowing what you don't know? Certainly one thing we found at the Royal Statistical Society is that when it comes to some of the data skills we're looking at, there are some firms that know they need to know data. Firms that do a lot of kind of high-level data science, they kind of know that they know they've got a problem. But what we find is with a lot of businesses, there are a lot of people, often quite junior in the organisation, often people who don't have a lot of respect, who work intensively with data and always have done, but that role's become much more important. So there is something to do with not just kind of reading Wired magazine and seeing what's cool, but understanding what your staff have been doing for a long period of time, and that kind of understanding, for example, perhaps some of the less glamorous data needs, and seeing how you can then upskill those people and respect the skills they already have developed. I think that's hugely important.
I see. So it's spending time with the workforce and understanding almost what they want to do, what direction they want to take it. And to Mark's point, you have to actually listen to the people you employed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And you agree with that? You agree with that, Irene? That's it really is. It's almost a two-way process. You have to trust the people that you brought into the organisation to scale with.
Yeah, we looked at some of the ways in which scale-ups are very productive, and it's because they're actually very much listening to the employees, allowing to have that feedback loop and actually innovating from what the employees are saying rather than what maybe the senior level of the organisation is thinking. I think Chris's point was really well made earlier as well. You can't, when you are at the CEO level, the COO level, really growing fast in that leadership level of the business, you can't lose connection with the day-to-day team, and how you do that through the broadcast in whichever way it is. I was reminded of one of my chief execs previously. He used to always write an email on the plane or wherever he was about what happened that week. It made a huge difference to every employee getting that and knowing some of the direction of travel and thinking. And I think you have to evolve that communication strategy as well. But if you get disconnected, you will very quickly find there is problems that arise in the business. And I've seen that with scale-ups, but I've also seen it with very large organisations. And it's how scale-ups, staying nimble and agile and connected, really important.
Irene, you said in the last review from the Institute there was more you thought that academia could do that was really pushing on collaboration. Obviously we've got a good example here tonight, but we still need more of that, do you think? Has that moved on since you published?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think what Imperial's doing is fantastic, and I know they also work really closely with Elite, and they really are trying to work with the ecosystem around this, and it's a really great thing to see. I've been with a hard hat around that when it was actually building, and now to see it live and businesses in there is fantastic. I think we need to see more of that. We have some great examples around the country: Side Business School, Cambridge University, Aston Business School, Leeds. What's happening in Strathclyde? They've got the Growth Advantage programme there. Edinburgh puts a lot of their academics, actually a real crossover between academics going into scale-up businesses. And we want to see more of that crossover happening. And we want to see also more of that collaboration happening through the various programs that can occur, whether it's R&D, whether it's giving some guidance on the leadership development, whether it's peer-to-peer groups, or whether it's creating the space that Imperial has. I think there's real opportunity, and there's many of our business schools grabbing that, but more to be done, and more by universities who can learn from others like Imperial. So, there's much more to do, but I'm enthused by the opportunity that the universities see in this as well.
Stian, do you think universities' role in skills changes a little post-COVID? I mean, there's pressure on graduate numbers probably going forward. There's pressure on finances. One example, I think Sunderland University has ripped up its curriculum and does a lot of vocational practical courses now. So do you think this is the moment, needs must, universities actually have to push themselves forward here?
I mean, universities have a very special role to play because they're often the only big permanent institutions in many cities, in many places. They've got that kind of broad sense of mission. So this is a really important thing for them to step up to. I think the effect of COVID clearly is going to have big financial effects on universities. They've got to deal with an influx of students in some cases that they weren't expecting. But I think in this potentially new world where workforces are changing, where there will be this greater demand on skills, particularly if we're into a world of more remote working, that challenge is redoubled, and there is something for universities to aspire to more.
Mark, you agree with that? It's the year of the business school?
Well, we're full up right now, and,
really?
and it was a concern very recently would that happen, but. Yeah, we've been scrambling to find places for everybody that's coming right now.
And what's driving that, do you think?
Well, partly it was a certain debacle that's been in the news, but I think as well, like I was teaching this morning in South Kensington, and students want to learn. They're just hungry. It's charming. It's wonderful. We have only a portion of them in class, and we have the rest of them in monitors at the back, and the tools that are being developed now to do all of that, I'm impressed at how well it works. It's hats off to our team. But I think it's just the things that we've been talking about, students are very aware that a lot is changing, and for them, being 18, like if you're a first-year undergraduate, you're doing it in COVID, and if you're thinking, do I want to, or wait until this is all over? And a surprising number of students, and I would have been among them, are like, bring it on, here we go. So I think it's zest for life.
It's something like collective experience, isn't it? Of everyone, let's start it in lockdown, let's start it, on Zoom, and crack on. I guess there's also something, maybe it's not fed through yet, but if we're heading for high levels of unemployment, I think that's good for education.
We always have an uptick in applications.
People start wearing ties again.
Well, don't go crazy.
We've just got a few minutes left. I'd like to come back to you, Chris, and just give you a couple of minutes. Well, I'd love to send us off on a positive note. You talked all about the great things of Silicon Valley. Are there a few other good things you could say from afar that you see about the attributes that London has to really crack this skills problem over the next couple of years?
Well, I think that people can look at the tremendous success that London has had over the years and extrapolate forward from that. I think that obviously one of the things that has been most appealing about London is it is a great place to live and to work. I mean, all of you who are there for a reason. It wasn't because you said, I love the weather in London. It's because of the vibrancy of the people and the culture and the openness to people coming from all around the world. In that sense, London is very much like Silicon Valley. And at least so far, while there has been some concern over Brexit, London continues to be a place where many people will go. And I think that that is a core strength. I think the other strength is the fact that there is such great cooperation between the institutions and the different people in the ecosystem. I mean, this event itself is a great example of this. Here we have a combination of public and private. Here we have a combination of academic and business. We have many different players in the ecosystem coming together. And the fact that there are such deep ties between different parts of the city is so important. One of the pieces of research that was done very famously a number of years ago, and it's only gotten more important since then, is research in a book called Regional Advantage by a professor named Annalise Saxenian, who looked at Boston and Silicon Valley and asked the question, why is it that Boston, the region which had the greatest concentration of education, the greatest concentration of government funding, the greatest head start in technology, was eventually overtaken and surpassed by Silicon Valley? And the answer really boiled down to the fact that Boston was much less adaptable and open to change. It was less networked, where people tended to just communicate with the people within their own companies, as opposed to going from company to company, having that recycling of talent that I referred to earlier, and where people were discouraged from moving from company to company by non-compete agreements. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, that's great, people stay loyal. But on the other hand, so much of innovation is driven by diversity of experiences. And my friend Franz Johansson wrote a book called The Medici Effect, which looked at the fact that diversity, not just diversity in terms of ethnicity, but also diversity in terms of backgrounds and disciplines, really drives creativity. And so when you look at the evidence of things like regional advantage and the Medici Effect, you say the best possible place to drive innovation is a hub which is tightly connected, where there are a lot of people in the ecosystem who care about driving innovation, where there's a tremendous amount of raw talent, and where the openness and the society itself attracts great talent from all around the world. So when I look at all that, and I see that London has all of those things, London continues to be a place where the young people of the world want to live. We just heard about how they're surging into Imperial and filling up the classrooms, also due to a minor debacle, but we won't get into that. And I'd say that this is a good sign for the future. And I think that if people are able to continue the process of encouraging people, not just at this point to study at college or business school or university, but also to be those lifelong infinite learners, I think London will continue to be a great place to start a business, to grow a business, and to grow your career.
Thanks so much, Chris, and thanks for joining us tonight. Much evidence, I think, that the skills agenda has moved forward in the UK with focus from ScaleUp Institute and others. The challenge, of course, is that COVID and Brexit doesn't set us back. Perhaps a little more sustained focus at the national level, and there's certainly lots of great things happening at the local level with collaboration between universities and companies and so on. Thanks so much for joining us tonight and for your contribution to the first Scale Factor. Thanks also to all of our speakers, to Chris, Irene, Mark, Richard and Stian. There'll be edited highlights of this event posted on the ScaleSpace website in the coming days, and please watch out there for the details of the next Scale Factor event. Thanks very much. Good night.